for you. Hey, take it away.
All right, Laura, thanks so much. Appreciate it. This evening, Tuesday, March 18th, welcome to a webinar regarding a paper that was published today in JSCAI. The name of the paper is Governing the Unbound, SCAI's Role in the Future of Artificial Intelligence. It's a part of a JSCAI artificial intelligence issue. Good afternoon, good evening. The authors with us this evening are Doctors Afnan Tariq, Hussam Lada, Dipali Tukai, Raghava Velagaletti. I'm Curtis Rooney, your moderator, and SCAI's Vice President for Government Affairs. The paper is the product of SCAI's Advocacy Committee. And let me just ask you all to introduce yourselves, starting with Dr. Tariq, if you don't mind, just telling the audience where you practice and what kind of setting it is, and any other kind of details you'd like to provide.
Yeah, no, thanks for having us, Curtis, and thanks for putting this webinar for the SCAI membership. I think it's an important and timely, or just reaching its peak time topic. But for my background, my name is Afnan Tariq. I'm an interventional and structural cardiologist based in Southern California, particularly Orange County. I have a faculty appointment at the University of California, Irvine. And a strong interest, obviously, in interventions, but general cardiology and the appropriate utilization of technology. I'll say that broader, and then AI being one of those technology tools. So I'll hand it off now.
Dr. Lada?
Hello, hi, good afternoon, good evening. Thank you, Curtis. And then thanks for arranging this webinar. Thank you to the SCAI. My name is Kusum Lada. I'm interventional cardiology. I work for Sutter Health in Bay Area, California. I'm also board of trustee for this SCAI. I think this is really exciting time that we are getting into these technological machineries tool to get integrated into interventional cardiology. However, it is really important for all of us to participate in this integration so that we can provide the best care to our patients and to our physicians. So thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Tukey.
Hi, good afternoon and good evening, depending on wherever you are. Thanks, Curtis, for putting this together. And it's really great to be here in these times. So I am an interventional cardiologist practicing in Southeast Houston. I'm Dipali Tukai, and I forgot to mention my name. But I'm in Southeast Houston. I'm an interventional cardiologist predominantly, but I do a fair amount of general cardiology. I have been with the SCAI Advocacy Committee now for about 9 years, and I have enjoyed working on various aspects of regulation and contributing as a group towards, structuring things. And AI is such a new kid in the block with so much potential that harnessing that potential in the right direction is very important for people who know the field very well, which happens to be the interventional cardiologist. And SCAI being like the lead society for interventional cardiology, I think it seemed very timely and appropriate for us to write this particular paper and get the conversation started.
Excellent. Thank you. Dr. Velagaletti.
Everybody, thanks Curtis and SCAI for putting this together. My name is Raghava Velagaletti. For the past few years, I've been interventional cardiologist based in Boston, also investigator with the Framingham Heart Study. Like Afnan, I also have an interest in technology. And one of the things that spurred me to be on the Government Relations Committee at SCAI is I have served either as a mentor or a judge for a variety of hackathons in biomedicine organized by MIT. And it always struck me how much discordance there is between what the technologies folks think should happen in medicine versus what the doctors think should happen in medicine. And I think that was a big impetus for me to say, well, we should be taking charge of our destiny and of what influences our work life. So, and that should apply to AI-based technologies too. So here I am.
Thank you very much. I think that's really helpful. I was going to ask as my first question, what drew you to it? So I think you've described it. Dr. Tariq, did you have a similar experience, or what's your experience?
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly a similar experience. I think we all get into cardiology and interventional cardiology because we like technology, we like tools, whether that's the newest, fanciest stents, whether that's valvular intervention, and it's understanding the utilization of those appropriately. But like Raghava mentioned, we're usually kind of consulted as end users, and very rarely it's engineers who bring the product to you and then ask you how you can use it. As my background, I uniquely had an opportunity to go into building new medical devices briefly through a CRF Innovation Fellowship, which I did, and that was really needs-driven innovation. So understanding the framework is really helpful with technology and how to really identify unmet needs. We have so many needs in interventional cardiology, and we have emerging tools, and understanding how to apply those effectively, safely, and with maximum impact is really the goal of what we should be trying to achieve.
Excellent. Dr. Lotta, what's your experience? What drew you to writing on this subject?
I think overall that some of the image interpretations and sometimes like overlying your imaging like coronary angiogram with your some of the intravascular imaging or like you get analysis of like coronary flow, those kind of things during the procedures. But overall in the clinic also it can make you more efficient by your voice recognitions and getting into just direct live in experience of the patients to your chart, and which you can forget, and eventually it can be helpful for your patient's care as well as for the physician. It can be non-clinical stuffs are pretty time consuming and can be a big obstacle in providing the best care and a lot of time to your patients.
Dr. Takai, why did you volunteer to write this paper?
Well, I think primarily, as it's been already mentioned, this is something new, and the people who are developing it, the engineers, the programmers, they truly come from the stance that this can solve everything. This is like the key to opening up everything's fixed room kind of thing. And as a physician, as Raghav mentioned, we know as end users of that technology, that's not necessarily true. If there's A, if there's B, C is not necessarily your answer, which is what algorithms usually do. There's a lot of thought process to it. And I think, pointing that out that, hey, when you do this, this is great. But once you have this information, this kind of thought process needs to go with it. And then over and above, a conversation with the patient, because you can't just have a program telling somebody, oh, this is what you have, this is what you need to take, and you're done. And that doesn't go well with patients. They want, hey, why this, why not that, how did this happen? And that's something algorithms can't come with. So how do we use the AI technology in conjunction with, rather than as a supplementation of the clinical thought process? And I think that's what's drawn me to be able to contribute and overall help in shaping the process as it is developing, rather than come in 10 years later and say, oh, this doesn't work, we should have done it this way.
So just staying with you, do you have experience with AI? Both
So I
either in your
personally,
personal or your medical?
my experience with AI is utilizing the currently available AI technologies with voice recognition, developing your notes, and you already see, when the electronic medical records marketed to you, they basically say, oh yeah, this is going to be a perfect note for you. And then once you go through it, you realize, wait a minute, this can actually generate a medical legal liability for you. You have to go through it again. You have to correct it, right? And I think that's a very simple example of why this whole process actually needs to be guided by people who use it and who understand it, rather than people who believe they can fix a problem that they see in a field that is not their primary field.
Excellent. Dr. Lotta, what's your experience?
I think the similar stuff, like when your patients like send you in the medical, like what we call in the Epic is MHO, the AI will generate your draft. You need to definitely go through those drafts. Those are sometimes can be striking and sometimes can kill you with all these informations. And if you have like some of the medications they are asking, and they will be like, okay, it can cause the bleeding and this, but below that it can give you some other non-cardiac medication information. So you have to be definitely use this with a wise, like your eyes. And so one thing I like over the years, we all know, but right now, as Dipali said, that machineries cannot replace the human beings. This is just a new tool, and we just need to use this tool so that we can increase the patient care. But we have to be very, very cautious about this utilization, because in a blink of time, especially in the very complicated and intricate field like intervention cardiology, we can harm the patient. So this is really good, but machineries is still a machinery, and those also don't take any responsibility. They don't have empathy also about, like, they're not going to cry if your patient dies. So it's important that, you know, we do use all these things to provide the best and efficacious care to our patients, but we have to be very careful in implementation. And that was also one of the reasons that we want to be ahead of all this ball game, and let the leaders of this elite group of SCAI and the interventional group guide how we can implement the AI in our practice to provide the best care to our patients.
And Dr. Tarika, I saw you smile when Dr. Takai was talking about liability. And I know you're a lawyer, so I wonder what your experience is.
I'm the only one who smiles when you use the word liability. So there's that. No, I think it's when you there. It's funny, the incentives that we have that drive us to deviate from what you might think is optimal care for the patient, right? You might just want to have an open, honest conversation, but the perceived threat of medical legal liability, either through too much or too little information, is always going to be there in the background. I think coming back to first principles, like medicine is one of the original professions. There's a reason that physicians are allowed to self-regulate, right? It's because you develop the ability to regulate your peers through professional development over time. That's why we're allowed to have medical boards. That's why we have these special exemptions. That's why medicine is in a very unique place that I think off-the-shelf AI really can't approach, nor at this point should it. Now, that may change or evolve, let's say, the traditional provision of medicine. But that's where I think a professional society like SCAI coming in, taking leadership, saying that we are here to be the voice of our members, of the voice of how we deliver optimal care, because I think when and you and I probably know the case law on this, that was a long time ago, but those were the days that, you said this is a profession that is a calling.
Right.
And it's a lifelong calling which you aspire to, right? It's not where you're filling out charts and just serving as documentation or a license, but it's a calling to provide care for patients. And that's upon which the profession was built. And so the more we can return to that, I think the better we are. And that's more of a philosophical case, but I think in particular when we use technology, and whether that's stents or balloons, or whether that's a TAVR valve, or whether that's AI, it's understanding the patients in whom you're using that technology and how to use it appropriately in the service of better patient care.
I agree. And Dr. Galetti, you mentioned hackathons. Did that come up in your experience with AI, or was that completely different?
No, these were more sort of general purpose hackathons. They are, where a variety of things are looked at in terms of healthcare technology. Anything from something as simple as making a better nasal swab, make it acceptable for children to have nasal swabs for influenza. Something that basic end of the spectrum, all the way to a startup company that I once reviewed that proposed to go to gyms and get blood samples and do a panel of 50 biomarkers and tell the people what they should do to live their life better. Right? I mean, it's that entire spectrum you see when you go, look at startups or hackathons or stuff like that. My original entry into the AI space actually came from the research side of my life. I had used the precursors of current generation AI, which is machine learning, and natural language processing, to do some of my research projects. And if there are people in the audience who are researchers, they may appreciate that. Traditionally in medicine, If you want answers, some questions are better answered by experimental evidence. So you do clinical trials, some are by observation evidence. You do studies like the Framingham Heart Study, for example. But there are many questions that require us to harness clinical records. And therein lies the problem because the chart is very, very difficult as a source of research information. So to give you an example, I had used the natural language processing to extract ejection fractions from charts so that I can do a project relating ejection fractions with PCI outcomes. So things like that. That's how I got started in this whole interest in the AI space about 10, 12 years ago. And then that slowly grew to involve other things. Now with generative AI, there are actually now AI models where, if you put your research papers into it, they'll write your thesis for you. So these things are moving real, and that's been out for the past few
Yeah.
months. So
Mhm.
so these things are moving really fast.
Yeah.
And what I want the audience to understand is something that Afnan already said is whether we like it or not, these technologies are going to hit us. And
Right.
I think from SCAI's perspective, what we want to do is advocate that whatever comes on board should bear two core principles in mind. One is the best possible patient care, and two, preserving the physician's autonomy to provide that best possible patient care. And I think if we as a society, with the help of all our members, can put forth guidance based on those two principles, I think that would be victory for all of us, clinicians and researchers.
But just to highlight what you're talking about, when we began to write the paper, we said the FDA had approved 100 AI applications. And I looked it up for the webinar and it was 1,000 by now.
Mhm.
So, I mean, it's moving incredibly fast. So, with that in mind, I'm just wondering what the upsides are of AI. Let's talk a little bit about that. We mentioned some of the scheduling and some of the paperwork. Uh, Dr. Chukai, if you don't mind talking a little bit about what you think is the upside, and then we'll talk about the downside.
So I guess upside is, as everybody's mentioned, is going to be taking away a lot of clerical work off from you, which could be in the office space, whether it's your scheduling, your paperwork, your notes, or even like, potentially at some point you just talk and it's picking up on everything. It's putting your CPT codes in. It's even sending the medication out if you're able to correctly say that and penned it for you to just sign, stuff like that. And potentially, I see a lot of role for it in the future if correctly done for, benefit verification and prior authorization. Just the way the insurance has everything already on a virtual system, this can run from the physician end too. So I can see a lot of upside in the office space for that. In terms of what we do in the cath lab, I see a big benefit from, better lesion assessments, better stent or device assessment, be it the valve, be it the stent, in terms of its dimensions or how you want to put it in. A lot of guidance from there that can make the process more precise and less stressful for you instead of having to think a whole lot and hopefully shorten the time duration spent and the contrast utilized. So there's a lot of upside to utilizing this technology across the board from cath lab to your exam room as an interventional cardiologist.
There's a lot of
And
upsides.
So I think it's very useful, the pre-procedure or some other, it can provide you a lot of robust, comprehensive clinical information of very extensive patients, critically patients who are being a patient for 20 years. So going through thousands and thousands of chart can have a human error and in different state. So AI has a potential, like very good the utilization we can do in getting the cardiac review of those patients' informations over the period of 20 years. So you can make a good clinical judgment in the patient care. In the cath lab, we are ahead of time and like we are out of the plain coronary angiography. Now we are doing even intracoronary imaging, but we want a little bit more than that. Now we are into plaque like what kind of plaque is that, whether this is like what is the histopathology of the plaque, or whether we can do some kind of a stenting with those histopathology and prevent the further acute MIs. And also, of course, Dipali said valvular area, very precise stent placement. The post-discharge patients, we can also use these things about how to provide some of the best heart failure medications, how we can integrate the AI so that patient can get a timely and real-time medications, and we can get the information. So of course, we have to find out about more human role in that, providing and then regulating that to get to the physicians and how we can do that. But we can provide a lot of best care about the patient doesn't miss the dual antiplatelet therapy, heart failure medication. They can be discharged, they can get a cardiac rehab and those kind of things. And then AI can give all this information to the patients that why these are important and they should not be missing in the real time. So
Thanks. Dr. Belgilati, you mentioned the Framingham study. Do you see a upside for AI with respect to research like that?
Oh, yes, absolutely. I mean, any data analysis, data gathering, data distribution enterprise would benefit from some amount of automation and maybe a lot of automation, as time goes by. So, there is definitely a role for um, artificial intelligence tools on the research side. Now, I think where I'm not quite sure there will be value in it. I would tend to think of research as a sort of two-step process. One, you have an idea and you conceptualize it in terms of how you're going to come up with an analysis to address the question and the idea. That to me requires an experienced investigator.
Hmm.
I don't think there's any substitute for that. But once you have decided how you're going to execute it, the execution piece can be dramatically made simpler, more efficient, and the analysis performed with much more finesse than than human beings trying to do that with writing their code. So that part of it, I think there is a chance that AI will very quickly get into that space and help with speeding up these analyses, which will be all to the good because there is always a gap between the time research is done and it gets published for doctors and to read and patients to benefit from. And even if you save a few months, that's still good. So there is value in data analysis for sure.
Mhm.
Yeah. Dr. Tarek?
I mean, there's tremendous upside. When we're so early in the experience. I think one thing that we have to also understand is that sorry, let me edit that. We're early in the experience for generative AI. We're not early in the experience for AI machine learning, right? This is a field that has been developing for well over a decade, and it's kind of understanding those things. And I know that it's you have to get really deep into the semantics to understand those differences, but we're very early in the generative AI journey, but not all AI is generative, and nor should it be. I think Raghav was talking a lot about different machine learning applications that can be used in specific cases. And when you look at very large data sets, some sort of machine learning or optimization of those data sets can be very beneficial. But again, they're not currently, it can only train on what's there. So if you're in experimental use, you're setting new frontiers, and that requires a human mind to currently set that. Currently, again, there's a lot of things to say there. So I think there's tremendous upside. And since I don't know if you're going to go back around if we're doing like a snake draft format, but I'll just go straight to the downsides. Is that
Yeah,
it
please.
can be used in a tremendous and a number of ways that can negatively impact or just not appropriately impact. The issue with creating so much, the ability to generate so much, is you can generate a lot of noise.
Yeah.
And noise is not helpful. I'm moving away from veering away from, theoretical actual harm to patients. I know that'll probably come up as a different topic, but there are so many things out there that understanding what is true signal and what is noise, which is what AI should be able to do. It's going to be, at least in this emerging period, a difficult area to moderate. And I would say moderate there. And that's again where experience and expertise through training, through lived experience as clinicians affords us a unique opportunity to be involved in the adjudication and kind of the moderation of these platforms and what the signal is, because there are a lot of promises out there. I have 4 kids. They make a lot of promises. Not all of those are going to be true, right? And so that's kind of the way I look at it now.
Yeah, no, I get it. Well, let's be Debbie Downers. Who wants to go first?
So, if we are talking about the downsides of AI, I think there are a lot, and we have to be careful. The first thing is itself. If you go and put like these are your risk factors and everything, and they give you like 20 different labs, and the patient comes with the labs. So don't only think that this will be really a optimal minimizing cost. This can be increase the cost, and then I don't know how to use all this. Some of the labs I have no idea about. Even increase CRP and ESR in the patients who are already well optimized. I don't know what else to be done to prevent the risk of MI and ACS. So those kind of things can be harmful. Of course, the individualized approach to the medicine, and which is very important thing to provide to in interventional cardiology, gender specific, sex specific, we provide the care. AI has, we just have started. So this is far beyond that. And also one thing worries me, who takes the responsibility if AI has misdiagnosed? We have still not figured out. And who has responsibility? Is it the companies taking responsibility? Is it your organization? Is it the society? Or is it a federal law? So if the federal law is taking the so we have to define that, and that can be only defined if we can form a very good regulatory oversight, and then that can be done by the society in conjunction with the federal or the organization that who should be taking the responsibility, because we are ahead and we are moving fast. As Curtis said, that there are hundreds of the projects and they're all approved. But how, I'm not sure, and you can answer me, Curtis, how they are approving this, because I thought all this approving process is pretty comprehensive and challenging without writing that who will be over the time is responsible for the any kind of events that can lead to a patient life. I'm not sure about that, and that's pretty.
Yeah, no, that's a very interesting question, and in that world, in liability world, you use the reasonable man standard, right? And so that will all have to be adjudicated, and I suspect it might be adjudicated by physicians on one side of it. So, all right, that's a downside. Let's
But
talk
even
about.
even at the organization level, if a physicians are like, we are using the AI, I have never consented that AI will do the mistake on my behalf and I will take the responsibility. So I think I'm out of that game. I am not responsible for that.
So, the way things stand right now, Curtis, I'm sorry, I'm going to jump in a little bit here. The way
Yeah.
things stand right now, everywhere, in the policy making scenario where the governmental agencies are actually regulating AI in some form or are forming committees to regulate AI in some form, everywhere when you read through their documents, eventually the responsibility is of the physician. That's where we stand right now. Okay, it's not of any company, it's not of any agency, it's the physician's responsibility. And I think one of the downsides to AI, and it's not a downside of AI itself, but it's a downside of how a technology gets utilized. Everything is whoever invents it with best intent, and then somebody goes and blows up Nagasaki and Hiroshima. So you can always end up having that happening, right? And I think that's where we have to be very cautious, because a lot of people who are developing these technologies are developing it with the whole premise that, oh, this is going to replace the clinician. And I think that is where the danger is, because then they go market it, and people these days believe anything that's on social media or wherever it's marketed. And where do they go? Where are we going from there? And how is this going to be regulated? And right now, there is no policy, and there is no there is no guidelines as to how this can be even promoted, advertised, or utilized. And basically there is a lot of potentially in healthcare right now. There is a given that there is a lot of quote unquote profit margin. There are a lot of people who are getting into healthcare because it's a fantastic business that never goes down. And I think that's not a downside of AI, but that's a downside of human thought process in certain ways that we need to figure out how to regulate that. And that's going to be one of the biggest challenges of introducing AI as a tool in healthcare, and keeping it as a adjunct to physician clinician rather than a supplement, which is what a lot of people are looking at it right now as.
Yeah, and I'll just comment that, when we were going to publish, well, in the paper, we talked a lot about some of the guidelines that had been put in process in terms of AI and various government agencies, what their role is with AI during the Biden administration, and then we had to insert a paragraph or a sentence basically saying whatever we said before, the Trump administration has reversed it. So it's not only the technology, it's the policy that is just so fascinating that it's going to take a little while to work through.
So, Curtis,
So
in the current era, how much we are we have some value at the level of Congress to speak up about all these healthcare decisions and then involvement of physicians, especially in these specialized field in making the healthcare decisions and participating in what is our value?
So, we actually have met with a couple on both sides of the aisle, a couple of the more luminaries in this area. One actually has a degree in AI, the other is kind of self-taught, but very knowledgeable because of his district. And so we are involved with those folks and having a conversation, but they're not much further along than we are, given the nascent nature of the product. They're just chasing headlines essentially. So, it's up to us to set up a system to be able to inform them. I think that's really the important thing.
I think this is a very nice moment to like just kind of state to our membership that, hey, for all this lobbying and getting the policymakers to listen to us, it costs money, and this would be a good time to donate to the Sky Pack, even if it's $5. Donate.
And that's why I love you. I
Dipali is
appreciate
hardcore Sky Pack, so she's not gonna miss that point. Good point.
Yeah, no, it's an excellent point. It really is very important, especially at this time. It's so you got to get it on the ground floor, and that's how you do it. Take us home, Dr. Vela Galetti. What are the other downsides?
So, I think Apnan and Kusum and Dipali did a good job giving individual examples of scenarios where we may have downsides. So I want to take a step back, sort of, give a more big picture answer, which I think follows up on what Dipali said, but I think would also address one of the questions somebody posed in the chat box. And that is, when you think about technology, AI, whatever technology in general, I tend to put in one of three possible buckets. And one is technology as a non-clinical substitute. And if you were to ask the majority of physicians, where do you need help? I would suspect that's what they would want it. Because nobody went to medical school saying, one day I'm going to be doing all the check boxes that'll get the AUC right so that I can bill perfectly for my patient, right? That's nobody's dream ever. You dream about, I'm going to grow up, become a doctor, and then I take care of a patient. So technology as non-clinical substitute is what most physicians want. That'll help with burnout, that'll help with workload, stuff like that. Technology as a physician substitute is where the dream of the techno-utopians is. The Silicon Valley types, the people who are, at the forefront of generative AI, there are people who are at the forefront of all this. They think that if you can create an artificial intelligence system that knows all the answers, then you wouldn't have to wait for a doctor's appointment. Then you wouldn't have to go, see a physician. You can just sit at home and ask a question and you'll get an answer, and the drug gets just shipped to you from an online pharmacy. And therein, I think, is the fundamental concern with this whole thing. Leave alone the individual particular clinical scenarios where they may or may not be AI's downsides or technology's downsides. As a physician community, that's what we have to face. There is sort of a misplaced or a misaligned emphasis on what technology ought to be. We want it as a non-clinical substitute. The techno-utopians want it as a clinical substitute. So what can we as a society do? I think in America, we are a capitalist society. We cannot tell private enterprise what to do. But any healthcare technology operates under the umbrella of, a healthcare legal regime, a policy regime. And that's where I think we can influence. I think if the federal government or the National Institute of Health or the National Science Foundation are going to put money into developing new technologies or aiding the development of new technologies, we can go advocate and say that put it for things that will prevent physician burnout or alleviate physician burnout, or maybe even act as a physician sidekick as opposed to, a replacement. And if Silicon Valley chooses to focus on the replacement, there's nothing really much we can do about it. But what we can do is talk to public authorities and say there should be a policy regime in place that this would be done, back to the 2 points I made earlier: best quality for patient care and safety for patient care, and preserving the physician's autonomy to provide that best quality of patient care. That, I think, is where our heart and soul should be, because tech startups are going to do whatever they can to make a physician substitute, and there's no point us getting all worried about it. Is what I think.
Interesting. So we do have a chat, and we do have a question. So from Dr. Allison Dupont, she asks, for busy clinicians, one of the most promising benefits of AI is reducing physician burnout. Should we as a society, as SCAI, prioritize which aspects of AI to focus on first? And whoever wants to take the question first.
So Curtis, that's what I was trying to get at when I answered is, yes, it would be great if we can prioritize, no question. But, we will not be able to set the agenda for private enterprise, right? We can influence public agendas by saying that we desperately need technologies that are non-clinical substitutes, so it alleviate physicians' burnout, take the workload away, and help doctors focus on what they're good at and what they've always dreamed about, which is the doctor-patient interaction. I think that we can do, and we can also advocate for a policy structure and a legal regime that would necessitate that any privately developed technology would also have to keep patient safety, patient quality, and physician autonomy in mind.
So anybody else want to take that question?
I mean, I completely agree, but I think there is an inevitability here, and it's not because it's incentive misalignment. Like, it would be great if we could have, going back to the Polly's point, it would be great if we could have AI to solve for incentive misalignment in healthcare rather than capitalize on the misalignment. That's using you give a consultant a hammer and they'll make $10 million out of it. But anyway, but besides that. I mean, the other things I think we just have to be careful about is you see and appropriately focus on patient safety and quality, but you don't get to safety and quality without access. Right. And if AI can enable patient access by facilitating physician time, by facilitating physician access to care, then I think you start the funnel where you can go there. I do think, there are intentional or otherwise, there are some institutional safeguards here, at least from large technology corporations. The liability risks for a publicly traded corporation are almost inherently too high to operate in the true clinical care provision replacement space, at least currently structured, right? If it's not your core thing, then it's probably not going to be worth the risk there because of there's no standard there. You can't have the corporate practice of medicine. There are a number of laws there. So I think this is an area that I had identified in the paper as an unmet need. And this is where we need clinicians to be able to bring the practice, the art of medicine back to the science. So the way I think about the opportunities here is, yes, we can do the back office automation. Like, good God, if we could all move away from fax machines and have something that just process the fax and put in a structure note, like, we all want that. Like, if I hear that note, I'm thinking of like, and this will age me, like an AOL signal coming over and a fax connecting, like the beeping in the background. It's like, great, that's happening now. And that's still happening in 2025. So AI should absolutely be on that, right? Like, there's no question about that. Physicians should be leading how we intentionally use it when it comes to patient care. And that's where I think it should be augmentative instead of instead of autonomous, right? So the FDA does have certain categories that are there for AI as a medical device. And I'm not saying that all things are like that, but there's autonomous versus augmentative. And I think if we can augment our clinical interactions rather than being a clinical substitute, if we can augment our analysis, I think it allows us to do other things. This, again, really incumbent upon us if we can enable better patient access there. But I think we all agree that physician autonomy is the goal here, not only to maintain individual clinical expertise and the profession, but also because there's a overriding principle that was there, when since 2000, which is move fast and break things, right?
Mhm.
Engineers like to move fast and break things. That is not a good idea in
Yeah.
medicine. That is not a principle that we hold to in medical care. And that's where I think that, physician leadership can at least move us to a state where let's move fast, let's move responsibly, let's solve for the unmet needs, and let's, come to solutions that will have beneficial impact on the back office and for provider autonomy, but really also impact patient access and then patient quality and care. I think kind of solving from the outside in allows us to really get there.
Anybody else?
I think Alison, point to just directly answer Alison's questions about that. This is again just like patient-tailored approach. We do that. Which patient requires what? We have different sort of practice, right? We have a sort of practice. Some people are doing structural, some people are doing interventional, some people are doing general cardiology or clinic or hospital, and everybody demands are different, right? Somebody demands a better note writing and then deciphering all this integration of all these images and labs in the notes directly, reply to the patient and patient access. However, if somebody is in 4 days in the cath lab, they will ask for more optimization of coronary imaging, more evaluation of intracoronary plaques, and how to put precise stenting if somebody is doing the valve. So it's different needs that will help those of group of physicians. So one particular thing, saying that which one we should prioritize, would be very difficult for us as a society to say that whether to write about the notes or the valve or this one. But overall, I think the first thing is we have to get ahead of this implementation stuff, because what really bothers me is over the many years, even in the other channels like PVDs, limb salvage and everything, we are, I'm not sure, and Curtis and then Afnan can help me understand that why our voice are not heard, and we are the last one that they will hear after the amputation prevention and several things. So the first thing is they will go to the Congress, who have no idea. If you remember in Atlanta, we had one of the Congress women, and she has an idea that one STEMI physician get $60,000. So that was out of proportion. Do you remember that?
I do.
That's what has thought. So I wish that could be the thing. So think of the out of proportion analogy, and those are our lawmakers. One. Second is then it comes to the insurance, and then it comes to the rest of the device and everything. And we are at the bottom of the food chain when we are the one who is providing the care and taking the responsibility. So this is really concerning that now this new thing is coming. And as Raghavan said, that the most of the people, they want to get into the healthcare because the holy grail is saving somebody's life. Nothing can substitute that. And everybody wants, whether they are in software, no matter where they're in hardware, they're in the business, but everybody wants to be involved in this, because that gratification nobody can get other than clinician. So we are still in figuring out that how we can be heard together as a society so that we can help them implement this and we can get benefit of that. And then the second question with where we will get the implementation and all sort of stuff.
Yep, I agree. We do talk a lot about this in the paper. Obviously, it's in the title. What is the role of SCAIs with AI? And what should we be doing? And the categories are big. It's education, best practices, ethical oversight, and then of course advocacy. Do you guys want to talk about any specific ideas that you all have with kind of next steps, or I'll just throw it open to what the question asks about SCAI's role.
I think I'll just talk about the first thing is advocacy. And it's really sad that, and I want to tell, I will be still anonymous to say that, but it's really sad. Just 2 days ago, among the group of 200 to 250 intervention cardiology group, and I was just discussing how FSCAI is important. And FSCAI, what does it do to you? It does advocacy, it represents, and think about all this work that's been done. And everything, I know that because I work for advocacy and government committee for many years. And one of our elite members, somebody, they said that FSCAI doesn't matter. And that was it was really sad because FSCAI in comparison to other one, and it doesn't matter. But I think just sitting and if you have time, you can invest your energy in that one. But how can you practice when you don't have all these things done? And think about that. Someday somebody is going to come that I'm going to implement this as AI, and you have to make the clinical decision, and you still have to take all this responsibility of the patient care. So this is what SCAI does, that they are being upfront, they are helping you more represent despite being all these hurdles, and upfront we are helping your education, your clinical practice, and preventing your further issues and complications and everything. And also it helps you it is your voice. So this is this was really sad to hear that is still in this era we think that FSCAI does not have any relevant contribution in your clinical care. It has, I'm in private practice, and I can't tell you how much support I get both in the professional and the personal upfront from the SCAI. And I think I will just encourage all the members to be part of this one, because let me tell you one thing, the more we need you, the SCAI needs you, more than that you need SCAI.
Other thoughts? SCAI's role?
I mean, I've had the privilege of being on the advocacy committee for a number of years now, and I think SCAI's role is really to provide leadership in this space, and that's really important. But I think it is incumbent upon our individual members to also provide leadership. After you pay enough board certifications and renewing fees, then it does start to become a little bit painful. And this is for most people at least their third specialty, right? Beyond internal medicine. But we have unique and very particular concerns. I think that not to borrow from Liam Neeson, but we have a very special set of skills, and I think that we have to find alignment around those and understand that. And we haven't really touched as much on the skills that we have when it comes to very procedural oriented things. But we, as interventionists in SCAI, we really do represent the continuum of care. I know that a lot of us do procedures, but we also understand the pathophysiology that led to the genesis of that condition, then the intervention, and then the post-procedural monitoring. That's why our paper tried to break it down across, we tried to target it, and some things we're looking at, there's so many solutions here, because that's what interventional cardiology touches. Yeah. And we touch the life throughout that cycle. And I think it's really important to understand that that's where SCAI can be really, really impactful in the membership too. Another thing that I think that Kusum highlighted on is why are physicians and not always why do we not have as much of a voice as we should? And I think they're changing politics, which is not necessarily the subject of this webinar, but providers are now spoken for by large healthcare systems. And when we talk about medicine, we talk about hospitals and healthcare systems. We separate the provider. But when corporations and when corporate practice looks at providers, it is a hospital that speaks for 1,100 providers. That is how providers are looked at. So they are the provider voice. If we can't speak through SCAI, then our voice as physicians and our judgment is being diluted, and somebody else is effectively speaking for you. And they may be using AI to speak for you. I don't know. But in general, we should be representative of our own voice here and try to lead, our society, our specialty, our calling to the future, and really across that continuum of care.
Anybody else?
I think that's a great point you mentioned, Afnan. We truly don't have a voice anymore that's individual. No one is listening unless you are part of a big organization or society. And I think, participating with Sky, doing advocacy, runs with Sky makes a lot of difference compared to like just being an individual who says, oh, this doesn't work and I can't do this anymore.
So let's take a step back. We have about 10 more minutes. There's an excellent question in the chat by Manzoor Tarek, which asks basically, where do you think we're going to go in 5 to 10 years? Get out your magic wand.
So if we want AI, if we have our own magic wand to change some of the AI, I think what is the optimal is individualized, patient-centered, and gender and all this specific care to the patients. And the AI should be the one who should correct for the self-corrector, just like Tesla. It's not advertisement of Tesla, actually. So self-correction, and that would be the holy grail, which is like a lot to ask from machineries, but still we are the human being, and this is how we got to the AI. So what next? Maybe we will be in double AI 2.0, something like that, self-correction and individualized approach to the patient care.
Dr. Velagalati?
Yeah. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, magic wand.
Yeah. So, earlier when I answered one of the questions, I put AI and technology in one of two bins, either as a physician non-clinical substitute or a physician clinical substitute. But there is a third bin, which to me is personally the more exciting of the bins, which is technology or AI as a physician sidekick. This is all the ways in which your day-to-day routine patient care and routine decision making is enhanced by AI tools. Now, in interventional cardiology, we're not quite there yet, but this is starting to happen in other fields. So, to give you an example, there are robotic tools to do joint replacements, for example. And if you feed the patient's data in and the scans in, and the robot is manipulating the knee on your behalf, it has a preset data set of like 10, 20,000 prior cases. And based on that, it analyzes and say, if you move it this your joint this much, and if you position it just like that, that gives you the most optimal outcome. Now, one can conceivably think of a similar scenario where 20 million angiograms are pre-fed into something, and it'll analyze every single angiogram. And, your angiogram goes into that and says, well, it can tell you, risk of perforation, likelihood of success. Is that available today? No. But the ortho guys got there, and so shall we. So the technology as a sidekick, things that will enhance our ability, become the second, third eye to our eye, become the third ear to our ears. That I think is the real exciting opportunity for the next fight. In the intermediate term, that's where I see most of the action happening is companies will try to use AI-based algorithms to fine-tune our clinical practice operations. And that I think most of us would welcome, at least the tech welcoming ones of us, and that should be exciting.
Dr. Tarek?
Yeah, first of all, AI couldn't have produced a moment where your dad jumps on to ask you a question in a webinar. So thanks, Dad, for that question. But yeah, I think it's also important to understand how far we've come already. And I think we are always looking forward to the generative AI, but what Raghav was mentioning is really important. But if you look at procedure optimization and things like flow reserve, we're pretty far advanced. We've adapted the best principles of computational flow dynamics, and there's without without getting into really deep into physiology, and then B, without disappointing Dr. Kern, who trained me on physiology, I'll like at a high level say that a lot of what we've done are surrogates. There was QFR and 50% stenosis and a 70% stenosis, which was validated against nuclear stress tests. And that's how we started the whole entire field. And then we validated FFR, which is a hyperemic index, which was supposed to measure flow, but because Doppler wires are fickle, we're actually measuring pressure. So we're using surrogates, and we've created surrogates upon surrogates with IFR, and now we're going back to resting flow ratios, and we're going there. So we've done this over time, and this is an area where I think that AI and machine learning in particular, that form of AI, is incredibly useful, and it'll continue to develop because we should be able to, with high resolution, if we can move away from dye-based cameras, with high resolution and flow rates, we should be able to get to things that actually are surrogates for flow, because we know flow is the carrying capacity of oxygen in your blood, and oxygen determines ischemia. The closer we can get using math surrogates and big data, then we'll be there and we'll get there closer. And that, I think, understanding patient factors and physiology and the underlying disease conditions, again, this takes physicians to come to that calculation, right? It takes physicians to understand what's going there and how to apply these things. So I think you can apply it very intentionally if you are that physician. So where I'd like to be in 10 years, I think one thing I'd like to, a bridge between now and 10 years, I rarely post on, I don't have any social media other than LinkedIn. I rarely post, but on LinkedIn, I posted something about this so we could get people to join. And somebody who is not a physician, who is an engineer creating in health tech, he replied to me and he goes, I really love this portion of the paper, and I don't know which, because it was a group effort. I don't know who wrote it, but he said, I love AI should be viewed as a tool to augment clinical decision making, not replace it. The unique combination of clinical experience, intuition, and human empathy that physicians bring to patient care cannot be replicated by algorithms. I think in 5 to 10 years, if we can get to the point where AI can help us do the back office and solve for the what is going on, what is happening in a patient's life, then we can unlock the why it's happening. That human empathy for understanding the patient factors that have gotten us there and how to solve for those barriers to care, that's where I think we can elevate ourselves beyond the routine and really, return to patient care and just being human with each other. I think that would be a really nice thing to be able to get to.
Yeah,
Like it.
Afnan, I echo your sentiment. If I had a magic wand, just like the way you talk in the cat lab, to be able to do the why, we should be able to do that even in our office space. Like go there, sit, talk, there's sensors all over, they pick up our conversation, note is done, meds are sent, bills are dropped, prior authorization is ordered. All you have to do is talk to the patient and hold their hand if necessary and explain to them why we are doing this, because a lot of times the biggest complaint patients have is, oh, I was given this but I don't know why, and why will it make me better, and being able to spend doing that instead of trying to type stuff and call people to drop these bills, that would be magically life changing for the profession itself.
So CMS doesn't reimburse for that. So they are hearing us. So there will be 50% reimbursement cut for the next year.
Yeah, but then you can see 50% more people. Right now, I end up seeing like one person in 1 hour. Sometimes if they start crying, I'll be able to see more people because I'm not doing their notes and everything else. So, I think there are pluses and minuses to it.
Still,
So
we
it'll
need
be
to
interesting to see how that goes.
Still, we need to revise those notes and the lines, because what is under the lines. So yesterday there was an MHO that whether I can get the Xarelto for the PVD, it's expensive. Can you change it? And the AI generated reply was, yeah, we can change it to warfarin. So that was for the PVD. No, we cannot change it to warfarin.
I thought you were going to lead us into the next conversation, like a plug for a next webinar on how we actually solve for the why, impact patient care and outcomes, and we make interventional cardiology the center of value-based care. I thought that's where you were going.
I think that's where I think that's where AI should take us, and I think that's where we need to advocate for policymakers to think of it that in that direction, instead of getting bogged down by the noise of like what can be substituted and made cheaper rather than what can be improved and provide better value for the same cost or maybe even less cost. I think that's where we need to be going.
I think the valued care for the interventional cardiology would be very expensive. They will not be able to afford, since there is no change in the physician reimbursement in last many years. 2000, just few years ago, United made 22 billion, and then with physicians, the administration cost has increased to 80%, and the physician reimbursement or payment is still 5 to 7%. So we will never be able to get the value-based care in this 44% of Medicare cut. That's a different stuff. So, but still we can try. So I just want to keep it like AI comes and another 4% will go to 14%.
No, I
I
guess, that will be a time for us as physicians to think as group and say, hey, our reimbursement is going to be a direct pay, completely different from your insurance and your hospital payments. But that's a topic for different different
webinar.
day,
Good.
completely.
So we are at the top of the hour. I wanted to thank you all very much for providing your thoughts, and I really enjoyed working with you on the paper. And hopefully, we'll have a couple more webinars and papers in our basket here. So thanks very much.
Thank you so
Appreciate it.
much.
Thanks,
All right.
Curtis. Thanks,
Thank
Sky,
you,
for